In 2007, High Plains Environmental Center worked with McWhinney, the developer of Centerra, BHA, a landscape architect firm, and Ecological Services to create a document for designing and building stormwater ponds that replicate the ecological functions of a natural wetlands. And in order to demonstrate the principles of that document, we created this Wetland Ecology demonstration garden. And the idea is that the general public and even engineers working on building stormwater ponds might not intuitively grasp the idea that there are zones within a pond. The zones are the aquatic zone, that is actual open water, the wetland zone, which is area of saturated soils, sub-irrigated, where there is moisture below the level of the soil, and the upland zone, which is a high and dry area. And we began to create this garden by drawing out the pattern on the ground and having an excavator come and dig the pond. We wanted this to look like the kind of braided landform that you might see if you were looking down on the South Platte River from Google Earth. And we wanted this to be a plausible ecological form called a second channel. It would look to the viewer as if this abandoned irrigation canal overflows periodically and has eroded this channel over a period of time. That actually doesn't happen, but it looks as if that is what would have created this landform. And we vegetated, we used the soil that we excavated, and we created these hills here, these berms. We set the topsoil aside, and then we put the topsoil back on top of these hills, and then added more pea stone gravel and more aggregate so that it would drain better. So this is the aquatic zone, and it's actually excavated down to be in the water table of this reservoir that we're next to. And this is the area where you see open water. Basically, this is called a prairie pothole, and these are critical for wildlife out in the prairie. This tall plant you see here is hardstem bulrush, and we have some alkali bulrush and Torrey's rush and various wetland plants on the edge of it. And this is the place where in the spring, when the water fills up, we see a lot of toads that lay eggs in here. And this is part of our wetland zone. And before we started here, there was an invasive non-native plant called reed canary grass, which can create a monoculture in wetlands. And we killed off the grass, and we, with a group of volunteers from the Brethren Church, we planted 600 4-inch plants that we grew in our nursery of the Nuttall sunflower and various milkweeds and Canada goldenrod and Verbena hastata. So different flowering plants that you would see in a wetland. And they've taken off incredibly well here. And all summer long, you'll see there's bees and butterflies coming and going from this garden. And you don't have to be a botanist to see that this is beautiful, and it puts on an incredible display when it blooms in the summer. And we think this has been very successful and added a lot of interest to the area. This is the upland zone, and this is characterized by well-drained soils, usually more gravel and rock, and you'll see a lot more shrubs and woody plants in this zone. So in here we have some of the gamble oak and rabbit brush and pawnee, sand cherry, and a lot of flowering plants that we either grew from seed, some by casting the seed out here in the fall and just letting it come up on its own, and also a lot of plants that we dug off the adjacent site where the apartments were built in 2009, and we held those plants over in our nursery and put them back here after we had this garden built. So we were able actually to do some salvage of native plants on an adjacent construction site. The area where I'm sitting here was intended to be kind of a natural amphitheater and a place where visiting school classes and other audiences would be able to sit and listen to a talk about the garden, about ecology in general, and specifically our focus here is the relationship between native plants and the pollinators and the value that native plants have in restoring the natural environment. And a lot of these plants in here are labeled to help people be able to identify them so they can use them in their home gardens. And we are a Plant Select garden. So Plant Select is a program that works with CSU, the Denver Botanic Garden, and the Colorado Nurserymen Association to promote plants that are suitable for high altitude gardens here in Colorado. Not all of the Plant Select plants are native, but we have chosen to only showcase the Plant Select plants that are native to the Rocky Mountain West. This is our Plant Select demonstration garden, and as I mentioned before, we have chosen to only feature the Plant Select plants that are native to the Rocky Mountain West. So we have the agastaches in here, and the ephedra, and salvias, and penstemons, and so on. And if you sat here for a while, you would see native bumblebees and hummingbirds and butterflies and goldfinches come and go from this garden all day long. It really has a tremendously beneficial impact on the wildlife here. One of the things that I love to show kids about pollinators and native plants is the salvia flower has a mechanism that puts the pollen on the pollinator and helps the pollen to be carried to the next flowers, and it's fascinating to watch. So if this were the hummingbird and its beak going into the flower, those little stamens come down and they put pollen on the hummingbird, and then they retract and it goes back to the next flower. And every time it goes to a new flower, there's each one of these has those little stamens that come down like a snake bite and puts the pollen on the pollinator, and then off it goes to the next flower. The work that we do here wouldn't be possible without the help of our volunteers. And an example of that is this viewing platform here in the garden was designed and built by volunteers from Intel in the fall of 2010. And they actually came up with the design on their own, and not only did they volunteer, but the company has a matching fund that goes along with volunteering. So at the end of their project, they turned in the hours, and the corporate headquarters gave us a donation as well. We have this picture of a small woman using a big auger for digging post holes, and she just has this great grin on her face, like she's having the greatest time drilling these holes, and I don't even really get that response from people when I actually pay them. So volunteering is a great exchange that it really helps us to include people in a hands-on experience of our mission, and we get a lot done that way, and it really helps. We only have 4 people on staff, so it really helps us to move forward with a lot of our projects. One of the things that we talked about when we were fundraising to build this garden is that it would be a benefit to wildlife, because the native plants are critical for wildlife habitat. Also, it would provide a breeding area for amphibians, and children who lived in the area would have the opportunity to connect with nature in this garden on a daily basis. So we were gratified the next year when this started filling up with water in the spring, that we saw a lot of tadpoles from the woodhouse toads and chorus frogs here, and just a tremendous amount of frogs and toads hatching out of there. And when I was putting up this sign, we were going to have the board of directors of the High Plains Environmental Center come out here for a meeting, and it was an official opening of this garden. And I was hurrying to get this done, and I had the extension cord was too short, and I had the wrong drill bit and so on. And it ended up being around 6 or 6:30 in the evening when I actually got the sign installed. And it wasn't 5 minutes later that I saw 2 little girls over here on this dock. And one said to the other one, "Hey, there's a new sign," and they ran over to take a look at it. And so that was cool that they noticed and that they were excited about it. And then they were looking at the sign, and I walked over very quietly and I just asked them, "What do you think this sign is about?" And one of the girls looked at it, and after a minute said, "There's zones?" And that was perfect, because that's exactly what we wanted people to get out of this.